Mike's up. Good morning to you and everyone who's listening in from Lagos and every part of the world. You must have heard about Lagos Talks 981. If you haven't, it's the final part of Smooth Breakfast that on Smooth 98.1. My name is Valentine Ohu.
I'm Ayo Myra. Say good morning, Lagos.
On this segment, we encourage you to get into a conversation of topical importance. The story that we'll be highlighting on the show today is about the sex for grades scandal that has been revealed again in another twist. This time around, a revealing video, an investigative journalistic report was that revealed the scandal in the University of Lagos. The school has taken a step further to suspend the lecturer who was caught on film positioning or propositioning and sexually harassing an undercover BBC reporter, a colleague of ours, Kiki Modi. This has brought up the conversation again. And in the studio, we've invited our special guest, Adinika Oyetunde, to join this conversation. Some other guests will be joining us in the course of the show, but the line of questioning, the line of conversation will be around the sex for grades scandal, especially as everyone is talking about it.
And of course, this is Lagos Talks 981. So we'd love for you to contribute to the conversation. You can do this via our WhatsApp platform 0809 4440981. If you choose, you could also use our Twitter platform or send messages via our Twitter platform at Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag Lagos Talks 981. We're also streaming this particular edition live, so you can go onto YouTube to watch what's going on and use the YouTube live chat option to send us messages.
All right.
Okay, so again, just a recap, the news broke earlier this week about a BBC Africa reporter in the person of Kiki Modi who had undergone an investigative journalism piece called Sex for Grades. Now, it's not new. We know about a few months back, an Ekiti State University lecturer was also involved in sex for marks scandal. Well, this was more detailed as he had video footage evidence with regards to the research done in Nigeria and in Ghana. So what happened was that they sent in undercover agents, if I put it that way, to go into the universities and act as students who needed help from these lecturers. And these lecturers were then seen in the video footage to have been, asking for them, for sexual favors in return for what they were going to do for the girls. A number of people have then come out following this report, sharing their personal experiences in university. Indeed, the newspaper reports that this is just about 0.1% of the millions of Nigerian students, both male and female, we must add, who have been harassed sexually by their lecturers, by people who have been put in trust as, in positions of authority in universities. Going by university policies, many of the policies in universities state that, of course, outlaw this. It's not right. It is against the policy of many of all universities to ask for sexual favors for to help or to assist the students. Indeed, in some universities, a relationship between a lecturer and a student is frowned upon. But today we want to talk about it in detail. And to join us for this conversation, we have two women who are, we've introduced the first person, Adeniko Yetunde, is with us in the studio. We also have a dear voice that has been missed on radio, and we have the opportunity to listen to her this morning again, and also as one of the I'm an activist in Nigeria, women rights activist in Nigeria, founder and
champion of the No More movement, hashtag No More movement in Nigeria. She's very vocal when it comes to issues like this, and she minces no words in expressing her sentiments regarding how these cases should be handled and the kind of sort of response that the public should give to it. We know that the government has been largely silent about these issues. Needless to say that in 2016, October precisely, the 8th Senate had passed a bill or introduced a bill that sought a 5-year jail term and 5 million naira fine for lecturers convicted for sexually harassing male and female students. And we know that the law is interpreted in a way that favors people. Now, let's introduce the topic.
She needs no introduction. We're talking about Miss Iriti Bakari Yusuf. Good morning, Miss Iriti.
Sorry, I'm late. Yes, she's late and she's here, but I ran.
You're never late.
Oh, thank you. Good to see you guys. Good to see you. On holiday, all over the place. Don't think I didn't notice. I noticed. And that woman that was giving you that eye, she's too old. On that picture you posted on Instagram.
How do you see all this thing?
Because I don't say anything.
Big Mama is watching.
A very big mama is watching, sir.
I almost lost my marbles when I saw you standing into this thing. I was like, oh my goodness. But so good to see you. And I mean, who better to talk about this than you? You've been front and center on these issues. And I remember once on this show, Freshly Pressed 91 Precisely, you mentioned that the moment majority of Nigerians actually speak up or own up to the realities that are existing in front of us every single day, that's where we'll start to see progress. But has that much happened?
We're getting there, aren't we, Adenike? We're getting there. We're not quite there yet because I think we're still afraid of that watershed moment. Yeah. It's slow, baby steps, and I've gotten to a point where I say to people, baby steps are God's anointment for when things are good, for waterfalls. Do you know what I mean? So that's where we are. Kiki's fantastic report, an undercover report, was just amazing. I must applaud her. I applaud her, not just because when you're a journalist, when you're a broadcast journalist, that's what we live for. Okay, you live to be able to bring out real stories, critical stories that's going to shape conversation, that's going to shape the landscape and shape society. And you live to bring it out in the really raw way. And I think she did it with the utmost honesty, vulnerability, and put herself out there. So as a survivor, I applaud her. As a journalist, I applaud her. I think, and every single person that was part of that, because she couldn't have done it.
Yes. You had Kemi, who was the undercover.
Yes, you had Kemi. You had some other CSOs that were also advising in the background. So I applaud every one of them. You have Ayo of Stand to End Rape. So many people were a part of that that report. It wasn't a documentary, the report that you saw. And so here we are again discussing it. So what was it? A couple of years ago, it was called Sex for Marks.
Yes.
Now it's called Sex for Grades. What are we going to call it in 2 years' time? I don't know. Sex for Lecturer, whatever. The concerning thing, and I heard what you guys were saying earlier on the grapevine about ASU, etc. We still need ASU to do so much more. That statement they brought is, for me, quite empty. We condemn it. Everybody, it's easy to condemn. But allow me to just alarm every single person that's listening right now. Look around you. That could be a predator.
Yeah.
A predator, the predator, that's screaming, condemning, saying it shouldn't happen, sack them, take them to court, etc., could be that person that's next to you who is condemning right now. He could be doing exactly the same thing. That's the truth that we're facing in Nigeria, because the chances are, as I say, if we have 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys, that literally means that every other, let's be kind, every other male in Nigeria at some point in their life or the other has either knowingly or unwittingly sexually harassed, abused, or raped a female.
I'm glad you talk about that, Ms. Ineti. The reason I'm saying that is because when issues like this come up, we see the ignorance of many people. So when you talk about predators and unwittingly, that word, and unknowingly,
knowingly and unknowingly.
So I mean, the knowingly one is obvious. You know, when people do it. I mean, Dr. Boniface was knowingly, but there's some people who do it unknowingly. Okay. And they're like, is that so?
The funny thing about it is, listening to her, I getting here, I have been sick. It has happened to me.
Yeah.
But not on the grounds of, academia or marks or grades, as the case may be. And the last incident that happened was, happened from the standpoint of a supposed friend. And it wasn't an unknowing, or it was intentional. It was premeditated. It was calculated. And the hope was, let's try whether this will happen or she will let it happen. And I remember that, in the heat of it, one of the things I said was, I'm sure you understand that this friendship is over. And not until I said that did he stop. And, the interesting thing is, this person was just started to see someone. And incidentally, excuse me, I'm just recovering from.
Yeah, sorry.
This person was seeing someone, and it became such a hassle about, why are you guys no longer close? So I remember reaching out and saying, look, your girlfriend is asking me why we're no longer close. I would respect you, something you feel to do to me, that you will tell her what happened. Feeling which, I will by myself tell her. It took years. And I'm glad that it didn't end in rape, but it actually was there was assault.
It could
So
have, yeah.
usually when we talk about conversation, have conversations like this, like Miss Iriti said, the question I want people to ask is, the people around me, the guys around me, have I genuinely asked the people I'm dating? Because these are conversations you have. They may not tell you the truth. That's because if you're dating someone or you have a partner and you say, oh, okay, this is, honesty time. What have you ever done? Have you done this before? They may not tell you this. But the sad truth is, if many women are saying that this has happened to them, so it means that more men than we think we know are the ones perpetrating these things. And these things have to be talked about. We have to talk about these conversations. We have to share these conversations. I think paramount to me about this whole reportage is the fact that there's certain things that I want us to, I want to personally touch on. And I'm going to very quickly highlight them. One is the conversation about, oh, what are the local reporters doing? Secondly is, some people doing some form of defense and saying this is an offshoot of colonialism. Some people talked about entrapment. Some people talked
Which is
about,
total nonsense.
some people talked about why are we not talking about when it's the female who are enticing these lecturers?
Yes.
Um, I'm going to take it from my own standpoint. I remember a few days ago when the thing broke. I remember Nicolas Ibekwe come out to say it's interesting that people would very easily talk about the local journalists and what it is that they're doing. Then he put a link to an article, a piece, a reportage that he did in 2015 about it. And I remember that he talked about one of the same universities as is currently in the news. So the question is, how much are we paying to what the local journalists are doing for us to condemn them in their entirety, to say, oh, they are not working? It takes a big media, an outsider to tell our story. On the other end of this is media executives in this country. I put it on social media and I said, I want every single one of them to search inwards and look at their consciences. How many stories have have your team sold to you, but you have discarded on the backdrop of, oh, how are we going to make money? Because the reality is, if you sell, a lot of people have amazing ideas, have stories they've been running undercover, but because they do not get the go ahead for people who run, own, and manage resources in these media outfits, they're automatically shut down.
I'd like you to hold that thought and encourage everybody to contribute right now. Send in messages through WhatsApp 0809 444 0981, because the conversation shouldn't be left for the guests, for the analysts in the studio, but to all of us. Everybody, we need to join the fray to condemn what is condemnable. This is Smooth 98.1 Lagos Talk Special.
Sorry.
You're not making my throat itch too.
Have you got a sore throat?
I'm just recovering.
Yeah, I've been recovering from mine. But you know what's helped? People don't realize. Exercise.
Yes.
It opens up your chest and you literally spit it all out. That's literally.
It was during this period I understood the mechanism of coughing. The doctor explained it to me about how your body is fighting the bacteria, the infection, which is what you, as often as something gets into your mouth, throw it out. Don't take it in.
Yeah.
Because your body doesn't want it to go below your throat.
Yeah.
Try to bring it
I'm
up.
like interested. So they told me, you know what, just slow down on the meds, and it has a 5 to 7 day cycle. It has to run its circle with or without medication.
Yeah.
I'm like interested.
Yeah. I mean, for somebody like me that doesn't take medication, I never take medication. I hardly ever get ill, but I never take medication. I literally just walk it off, sleep it off.
Your body,
yeah. I just let it heal, and it'll take much longer than everybody else. But if last week I had come here, I'd be doing exactly what she's doing. Yeah.
It's something that's going around.
Yeah.
It's going around.
Well, I reckon I picked mine from Elisha, bloody Elisha. Should keep their damn germs to themselves.
Oh my God.
I see they're bombarding you guys with adverts these days. Good God. Like, seriously.
Okay, so we have some comments.
Yes, we do. So sex for anything is not restricted to university, but all the institutions in the country. It's a symptom of a failing state because of all the institutions that will help to change this unacceptable behavior. Boniface, the face of sex for this. I said Boniface.
I'm telling you. As in the way he was glaring at the girl.
You know,
Aye.
I didn't know there was a longer version. I just finished watching it. I was
I
getting
wanted
here.
that night. I was
Oh
waiting
yeah,
for
the
7 p.m.
1 hour.
The 1 hour one.
Actually, they have Uniben as well,
Aye.
but because and this is where it's sad that the BBC, because the BBC have so many restrictions, and when you're an international organization working in another country, there's only so much that you're allowed to do. So right now, and the BBC always get very, very, very jittery when it comes to these things like legal. So the legal people they're going
Oh
over
yeah,
that Uniben one.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's why it hasn't been released.
yeah.
Wow.
Once they get the go ahead, there's a
They'll drop
Uniben
it.
one.
Please,
Yeah, they did
let's go back.
Uniben as
We're,
well.
we're on in 5 seconds. Studio. You're listening to Lagos Talks 91. It's a part of Smooth Breakfast here with Valentine.
And Ayo Myresi.
Smooth 98.1. This special is focusing on the conversation around sexual harassment in our institutions, not just the educational institutions, but every institution. And we have our analyst in the studio to discuss this in detail, to expose some of the nitty gritties of the daily happenings as we experience and the kind of conversations we should be having, the sort of questions we should be asking. We have Missy Retiba Yusuf in the studio with us.
Hello. Hi.
And we also have Adenike Oyetunde as well.
Good morning.
Now let's take some comments from you. Emeka from Ikeja says, sex for anything is not restricted to university, but in all the institutions in the country. It's
Absolutely.
a symptom of a failing state because all the institutions that will help detain this unacceptable behavior is weak or may have failed to.
Another message here from Falake in Unity House. It says a lot of these practices being demonstrated by our university lecturers are rather cheap, callous, and unbecoming of academicians who are supposed to set a locus standi. It is not only immoral, but also unethical and portrays lack of self-control, physical inferiority complex, and a bad sign for posterity as regards transferring a virtue to successive generations. A good punishment for such abominable exercise would be best implemented by the way it should be handled and rendering them impotent in the process. What difference exists as regards them and kidnappers who rape victims? For goodness sake, they are there to impart knowledge and transmit information for educational purposes and not to reduce the students to emotional heartache. Victims. God rescue Nigeria from this psychological debasement and abomination that will only end up at the bottomless abyss. Is it left for God alone?
Okay, before we went on the break, I mentioned four things.
Yeah.
I mentioned the one about what a local journalist is doing. I talked about the people who claim that it's an offshoot of colonialism. Does it have to be this same?
Foreign media
Exactly.
outlet, yeah.
And I talked about entrampment, and I talked about people who claim that it's closely related, the third and fourth. That
Yeah.
what happens? Why are we not having the conversation about when it's the female students who are luring the lecturers? I don't know if anybody has followed the Matlana story. And just yesterday, I was watching The View and I was overly excited. Why? In 2017, it came out that he had abused someone. Ronan Farrow, if you do not know who Ronan Farrow is, Google his name. I feel like he has won every award winnable. And the only thing left is just probably give him an EGOT and just say, we know you didn't act, but, just go because he's earned it. He's releasing a new book. And in that book, he details the experience that occurred with Matt before he left Fox, and the same woman who had come out, whose allegation had led to his sacking, had mentioned how it happened. Now, why this is very important is because now people are having a conversation about Matt shouldn't have been the only one that should have been sacked. Now people are finding out that this said ex-employee, reported to the authorities. And seemingly, they only saw or deemed it fit to sack Matt Lorna for the allegations. Now, what that shows to us for people who think and people who understand how this thing works is sexual assault harassment is simply a power play. That you like me, I'm your student, I'm a lecturer, we have genuine feelings for each other. It's complicated. Why? Because there is a possibility that you may have coerced me. Why? Because of the position that you hold. You are my lecturer. And these are the conversations that will not allow that holding or when they throw themselves to the lecturers stand. Nevertheless, it's also necessary as we are whipping up a lot of emotions because of what's happening for university authorities to now vehemently, clearly itemize, articulate, and tell every single person what the order of protocol should be if and when a student lures you, if and when a female student shows up at your office. Honestly speaking, I'm of the opinion that, again, the conversation goes to digitizing many things. Because if we digitize many things, the incidence of having your students walk into your office, knock on your door, will reduce. That's not saying that you will not have students come. But it reduces to the barest minimum. And until we begin to talk about these things and find how we can intentionally and on the long term provide solutions to these things, we are just going to allow this story die down. And like Mr. Reti said in our opening remark, in 2 years' time again, it's now sex for grace. This will probably go into another hashtag, sex for another thing. Now, secondly, you talked about institutions. It's interesting to me that Bukola Saraki put out a tweet, and I read the thread.
Yes.
And I saw that replied. One of the earliest responses to his tweet was, it's interesting that you would reply. It says, my mother works in the National Assembly, and consistently she's been harassed by one of your colleagues when you were in the 8th Assembly. What did you do about it? He still hasn't replied.
You know, at that point, I need to come in. And this is where you get so much backlash when these stories come out. Because the fear of the men is that, oh my God, if we let them get away with pointing a finger at this person, soon enough, somebody's going to point a finger at us. I'm afraid to actually support this BBC campaign because somebody, just like they said to Bukola Saraki, you are talking, you're not allowed to talk. And that's critical here. That's critical here. We need to get to a point of healing, but I'll talk about that afterwards. Adenike talked about local journalists and also the technology, and those are the two that I want to bring in.
People blaming it on colonialism.
Exactly. Oh, that's just absolute nonsense. I don't even think we should even give that any kind of we shouldn't give it any kind of play. The local journal, it's very true, and I hated the way people were coming at local journalists and saying this, that, and whatever. Look, fundamentally, if I were to write, right, I've written about this before, as you've read, right? I wrote it 2 years ago, or a year ago. Right. If I were to truly write the stories that I know, right? Heads of corporate would be indicted. They would be implicated, right? Now, I don't think anybody would take that story from me. Because the first thing is everybody's going to be afraid of a lawsuit. Don't worry, even the BBC are afraid of a law. In fact, the BBC are more jittery about lawsuits than we are. But but they make sure that, look, this story is worth telling. Let's take it to legal. Let's make sure our legal team have a look at it. Look, when I wrote the one to do with what's his name? The guy that used to work for the guy that used to work for Ebony Life TV. I'm forgetting his name now. One of the presenters on the men's room. Andrew Blaze. When that story broke, and I wrote that, and I sent it to Premium Times. I'll tell you, 2 other newspapers turned it down. Premium Times said, thanks, Ms. Riti, we're going to take it to our legal team to make sure that all the ticks, everything. And they were the only ones that would publish it. It takes guts and it takes care. And I needed to call our Premium Times and thank them for doing that for me. It takes guts so don't you dare come at local journalists, because 2 years ago, I wanted to do a documentary on this. Way before the BBC came on. Yeah. Okay.
I remember you spoke
exactly. About it. Could I get any money? Could I get any sponsor? And it's true. People have lives to do, so I'd have to need people to do the work for free, and it would take about 6 months to a year for us to do the documentary. Right? We're still going to do it. Hopefully, this will open people's eyes. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, like Adenike said, if we truly care, if we are at the point where we really want to change, then we can't just be paying lip service. We need to also put attention and money in the apparatus that's going to drive that change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riti, for touching on that. I would love you to hold on that thought, because when we come back, we're going to examine why our corporates are afraid.
Yeah.
Why the government
Sex for jobs
is afraid to touch on this.
Sex for promotion.
Stay with us.
Sex for exco.
As in, the list is long.
As in,
long. I don't know where we're going to start
you guys are the ones that talked about the state governor who appointed his daughter as an aide. The conversation cannot extend beyond death of meritocracy.
Yeah, it can't.
The reality is that
so much
you know that, because honestly, I'm not going to deny that there aren't students who actually throw themselves at these people. Let's be honest. But it behoves on them.
Yes,
it behoves on them. They in the position that they occupy.
Let's not. Okay, well,
my goodness.
I was going to say that.
How is that 16, 15? How can that happen? He doesn't even
daughter.
know what the age of consent is.
Yes.
No, most people don't.
They don't. They don't even
care.
understand the
But it's also
implication.
because there's no clear. Because on one hand, 18,
We will
on the other
continue
hand,
to
child
find
marriage.
excuses.
Yeah.
He's a lecturer. Go and find. There are lecturers that have successfully married their students. How did they do it without it turning into sexual
Shall I
abuse?
tell you who married his student?
Who did?
You will all be shocked.
The parents.
No, who married his student? Shrinka.
Oh, he's right.
Hey.
Really? Ah.
So let's just not go there.
Oh my
Most
gosh.
people don't
In
know.
number, yeah, in number of
Is
people.
it his current wife? I think she's his current wife.
What's the age? You know.
It's quite a few years. The point is that it is so round.
I moved on. It's okay. I feel like these are conversations that must. Be
Oh,
had.
oh, right. Wait, Mike was
You
on
didn't.
when I
didn't
mentioned
go,
that.
it
It
didn't-
didn't go.
your voice was low. Don't worry. These are conversations, and we're failing to realize that it's okay to unlearn what you already know. That's what people don't get. See, this thing I said about this friend. It was a clique of friends, and me trusting me, I just went to crash at theirs.
As you do.
I'm not joking.
Why
I
shouldn't
just
you?
noticed that, and I thought it was a dream. I just noticed somebody was standing over. I honestly thought it was. So I opened my eyes, and I felt, what are you doing? And I just noticed he was trying to kiss me. I was so grossed out. Like, what? I have never thought about you kissing me. Never dreamt of. Never. He was literally wrestling with me.
Yeah.
So if he had,
Where was his girlfriend at the
she
time?
wasn't around. His flatmates were around. And I remember telling his flatmate was so broken for a long time. I couldn't talk to him. I couldn't say anything. And I sent him, I said, if you don't tell her, I told him, I give you 3 days. If you don't tell her, I said, I blocked her from my phone right now. If you don't tell her, I'm going to pick up my phone and then call her and tell her what you did. Because she needs to know who you are. She really needs to know what she's getting. They married. I didn't go.
Naturally.
I couldn't. I didn't. I will not even attend such.
Typically.
Because she doesn't know. I don't know if it's changed. I don't care. It's none of my business. But
She didn't know. She still doesn't know what happened.
I
She
think
never
he told her
He never told
because
her. Or did
she
tell her?
never bothered to
ask.
for. I feel like
So if he told her, she didn't care to hear your version of the story, so
because
she
it's her
didn't
man
go.
now.
Yeah.
Studio, mics are up. We're back. The show, it's called Lagos Talks 91. It's a special on sexual harassment, and with recent revelations that have been put forward from the videos, the investigative journalistic reports, and the conversation is still extending beyond just the studio, beyond the tabloids. It's to every one of us. We should be having this conversation on a daily basis. How do you identify sexual harassment?
Excellent question. I really like that question. I think we need to start calling it sexual violence.
Sexual
actually,
violence, okay.
it's all sexual violence because if it's something I don't want and you're forcing it on me, it's a form of violence. However, good intention might be. So it comes in different forms. You've got the physical, you have the visual as well.
Yeah.
So most people will be like, what is visual sexual violence? What is visual sexual harassment? What do you mean, misery? How managed? Is it not the eye? No. I'll tell you a very, very short story. When I first got here, a boss, whatever. Anyway, I'm in his office. I had to go to his office to give him feedback on something. And I walked in and I sat in front of him and he was looking at me, and I remember saying, I will never forget, I said, please do not look at me like that. Because I could feel him undressing me with his eyes. And when somebody's undressing you with their eyes, when the gaze doesn't go, above a certain line of your body. When the gaze, it's only on a certain point on your body. You also know when the eyes are so intense that literally walking past, just even going to the loo, like you're like, oh my God, I can't even turn around, etc., etc. So and that comes from all of us having ownership of our body, and that's where I would go into parents talking to children about sex education. Sex education, not just in school. No, forget school. Look, remember Boniface was threatening the girl.
Your mother.
And he said, I'll tell your mother. No, well, I would dare him to threaten my son, because my son would be like, my mother already knows. In fact, she's by the door. Because why? I have always left it open. I've always had conversations about, from age 7, I started to talk to him about sex education and the ownership of his body. Right? Everybody is a different time for everybody.
Yes.
You know your child, you know when it is. I happen to find his hands in his trousers coming home from dinner one day, and I'm like, okay, time to have that talk. Okay. And then I did my talk, and then I called his dad. You need to talk to your son, boyfriend, you know, kind of thing. You know, and we've always had that conversation, and we constantly joke about it, and he's so comfortable talking to me. And that's the kind of space we need to live with our children, where they are so comfortable to come and say to us, Mommy, Daddy, teacher this, Mr. that, the driver this today. The driver was driving me to school. I was really uncomfortable. I didn't want to say anything because I was focused on school, but I noticed that his hand went over the gearbox, over the gear stick, you know, towards my hand, those kind of things. Yes. And if you teach your children to own their body and not to be afraid of their body, not that, you know, sex is the only thing you talk about after you've said yes to somebody or when you've married. No, it's not about that. It's about the fact that sex is not a dirty word. It's other people that make it dirty.
Absolutely.
That's what we've got to get into our children. Again. Sex is not a dirty word. It's other people that make it dirty. So if children are able to do that, then you can't have teachers who are going to be threatening them and stuff. So we need to change that conversation. And it starts from that very, 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 very low level. So imagine now you have all these men who were young at some point, who have now grown into lecturers, grown into corporate, you know, heads of corporates, businessmen, etc., etc. They're employers of people, employers of nation, employers of the youth. They've grown up with a narrative that says, especially the boys, they've grown up with a narrative that says, no is not no.
Yes.
She doesn't mean no when she says
say,
no.
You know this narrative of when women say no, they don't really
They mean yes, right? Now, again, I always bring it back home because literally I try to practice as much as everything I say here, I practice in my home because I am a mother too. And God forbid, I will not be going to court. I promise you. I really, and I don't even need to do it. I've got some brothers who will not even, they won't even listen to me say, calm down. They will just go out there and do what needs to be done. Is that I speak to my son and he's now 17. Think about it, he's 70, so he's the same age as that girl, right? That we saw in the video. Now, two different things. 99.9% of Nigerian students only leave home when they go to university. That's the first time they're spending long time, exactly, every other one away from their home, from the luxury of them, from the comfort, from the support, and the safety of their parents, right? So they go into the big wild world, which is where it starts in university. And they get there, and a lot of these things are new to them. What you saw that girl doing in the video, where she said, I've got to stay calm, I've got to stay calm. That's literally what happens to you when somebody is sexually assaulting you, either be it physically or visually. That's what happens. You're thinking to myself, okay, you know, I need to get this work done. I don't want it to fail, but I've got to try and stay calm as well, you know, not make sure it doesn't go too far, etc. So you're having all these conversations in your head. Now, a 17-year-old who is new to this wouldn't know what to do. So everybody that's saying, no, why didn't they, who didn't they, something, they know. It's new to her. They don't even believe, some of them don't even believe that these things happen. Absolutely. Because they've been, how do you say, cocooned for so long. And why shouldn't they? Why should they believe it happens? Why shouldn't they believe the world is beautiful and full of red and pink roses and fuchsia colors? Why shouldn't they?
Education for your children really important. Now you mentioned 2 types of sexual violence: physical and visual. How about verbal?
That as well. I missed that out. That was the third one. The verbal. So the verbal, I'll tell you, the verbal has happened to me so many times, and I'm sure it's happened to you. I'm sure it's happened to you. Adenike and our producer over there, I'm sure it's happened. It's happened to every other woman. So you're walking back. In the old days, he used to be the wolf whistles. Right? But yes, exactly. It stopped being the wolf whistles, and you'll be like, Omunawa for these trousers. And they carry you well. You know, my pigeon is disgraceful, as you know. But those
it's better than mine.
You know, those kind of conversations. I do not want you to comment on the trousers that I'm wearing. We do not have that sort of relationship. Absolutely. There is a line. It's a line. It's really, really, really tight. Do not cross over it. Those are verbal. Okay, that blouse, I know be say tight small. You know, those kind of conversations.
Until you be my
They're
caller.
discomforting.
Oh my
Exactly.
goodness.
You be my
Can I
love.
take this
You're looking
comment?
fine this morning. No, that's actually a discomforting statement, I find.
Please let me take this. I wouldn't mention names. The person has actually mentioned names, but I wouldn't do that. And just talk about her experience. She says this is a hydra-headed issue that must be tackled. The first time I experienced sexual harassment was my final year writing my thesis. I was understudying two prominent Nigerian designers. Midway through the thesis, I had to drop one of them due to his sexual advances. He was asking me to hug him anytime I was in his office alone. Second time was some 5 years back when another popular comedian walked into my office for a brand advocacy meeting with a male colleague and I. Immediately I got up to shake his hand. He started waxing lyrical about my body, just what you mentioned, going all gung-ho, and his wife was 3 seats away from us.
Oh, wow.
It took the intervention of my male colleague who warned him to desist, informing him I was married and might slap him if he didn't desist. We must stop raising boys with an entitled mentality.
Which brings me to the next question.
Yes.
Well, I've actually slapped a man before because we were going out on a date and he thought he could kiss me. I just whacked him when I was new to this country. I didn't think about it. I just whack.
Excuse me.
That was the end of the date.
Like we're in Nigeria. We're not in France or Italy where you could you could think.
I didn't even think of my safety. It was just a reflex action. I was just like, what? What do you think you're doing?
But then again, that brings us to questioning what is normal. Because when Miss Ireti was talking, I identified the fact that a lot of people are aware, are awake to their intuition.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can tell what is normal. You can tell when you're straying away from the normal. It makes you feel uncomfortable. But some people good with certain knowledge or understanding of normal. And then that now causes a very serious conflict where you now start battling with yourself and what you assume as normal and what is okay, especially when the predators are your family, your relatives who you live with. So how do you now break the norm?
What you have just described is the bane of our society. That I'm going to use the Big Brother story. So Mike is married, goes there, doesn't touch any woman, nobody grinds on him, and then we start to applaud him.
Like it's a big deal.
And I say that there is nothing to applaud. This is what should normally happen. But because the anomalies have become normal, when we see things that we blow it out of proportion. Now, the reality about it is this is an age-long issue that if you ask your mothers and your aunties who went to university way back when, they will tell you that this has been happening. But that it has been happening doesn't mean that it must continue, which is why we must of a necessity accept as individuals, as humans first, that nothing stops you from learning, unlearning, and relearning. If you were brought up, you know what forms our identities are several factors. Environment. Absolutely. Your first agent of socialization is your family.
Absolutely.
What they see, what they do, and that becomes the norm to you. So when you go visit a friend and you see that it's different, the mother is having a conversation with the child and is not scaring the child about sex. He's not saying once a boy touches you, you'll get pregnant. It's weird because where you're coming from, your mother has so scarred you that once a man touches you, that's it. You get pregnant, and nobody is going to. Society is just going to push you aside. So when you see that, you as an individual understand that, okay, there is a different world outside of what my family and my environment has exposed me to. In that moment, you owe yourself the responsibility to sit down, analyze, pick books, read up, meet people, have conversations, and now start to, and you will know what is good and what is bad. We always know these things. So that it has been happening for such a long time, or that's what your friends always do, or you and your friends have always never found a problem when a woman is passing on your street and you start to catcall her and say, oh, let me assist your boyfriend. He's not trying. It is wrong, and ignorance is no longer bliss.
Can I just say that? Sorry, we have to go on a break now. But one of the take homes for us for today's discussion would be really great if we can actually educate people. The truth is that there's some people who are genuinely ignorant.
Yes,
there's an education to come on that. So after the break,
you started talking about it, the kind of things that are not acceptable, that have been seen as normal, and we need to change that narrative so that people know that actually this is sexual harassment. We're looking at that in detail once we come back from this break.
Also,
I remember Nigeria Info talking about some guy. He was on the coven, and I remember, yes, it was Maoli. That's how I became his friend. And I literally was just describing his body. And then when we went on air, I think it was Sulu that said, you just sexualized him, right? Immediately, and I just started apologizing because it was not in tandem with what. If I'm talking about men doing it to women, then I must also be willing to accept my flaws. And incidentally, he came for an interview, and I apologized to him. I said, I know you don't know I talked about this, but I did literally sexualize you. And these are things that we must also talk about. It's not always the men giving the women. Sometimes women dish it out. You talk about, oh, look at his butt. He fits very nice in his pair of jeans. Those are conversations that need to stop. Because if it had been a man saying it to a woman, the whole office would have, oh, what do you mean by that? You did. I mean, if you...
Valentine posted shirtless photo.
He has posted his shirtless picture. It's you who wants to sexualize it. Do you understand? That he's posted... You can even just come and this your picture, but there's a thin line.
You can say you look nice.
So
you can say you look handsome.
There's someone, let me even know, there's someone in this office.
Let me see what she wrote, please. You didn't tell us the names. Where's the name?
What are the designers?
Forget story. Where's the name?
It was, I was like, oh my days. But I had to read that because it was important to what you're talking about.
I know.
Yes, so to educate them.
What did she say? Your last
It's not the message.
This is it now.
I was understudying the last.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Oh, yes.
That one has gone into
everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
No, wasn't it my younger sister? We were young in the UK. We met on the road. Don't even respect himself as a celebrity.
One mystery he was saying about the student and parents who went to the trip. I had to explain with my teacher in school, what English was. I was trying to explain that, oh, it wasn't me that then he began to kiss my tears.
Oh, wow.
Don't cry. And then he goes on, continues and says, don't worry, I won't tell your mom.
Exactly. Like she knows already. My mother's on the way to school.
My friend is living with friends in the US as I speak to you. 2 nights ago she couldn't sleep. Why? Because something happened 2 weeks. The person she's staying with is married, and that one's husband started to text her like, I like you. And then she thought it was something that will pass. She thought it was going to pass. So 2 nights ago, she just screamed, munched everything and sent her husband and just started crying on the phone. And what hurts me the most is this nuisance doesn't have a job. It's a woman who filed for him. So it means that the moment they tell the authorities, you're back in your damn country with nothing.
Yeah. But and it also means that...
Sorry, I have a question.
Go ahead.
You said something. I'm trying to understand it. Is it wrong for you to admire a lady?
No. There's a thing. It's a thin line.
No, but it's what
you said something like
telling someone you look nice.
What is wrong is you telling me what my butt looks like in the trousers.
Yes.
Because I can remember telling a lady on the bus she was on jean and her zip was not closed. I wrote it on my phone.
No, you can say, that's different. That's not harassment.
That's you looking out for her.
No. That's not harassment. You're informing her, I'm sorry, man, but your zips are undone. That's different.
But for the Unilag Boniface, it was an undercover agent.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's actually something discussion because that's the argument.
Studio, we're back.
Entrapment.
Studio, mics are live.
That's why I said
Mics are live. Mics are up. It's a very interesting conversation in the studio. Behind the scenes, you will, of course, be catching the scoop on YouTube. youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos. Lagos Talk Special is on sexual harassment, sexual violence, sexual inappropriateness, behaviors, and everything. We have Missy Reti Bakari Yusuf, believe it or not, I love her. She's here, and she's been doing great justice to this issue, as well as Adenika Oyetunde. Both very
my sister in troublemaking, aren't you? You know, they don't realize that I have sisters in trouble. When they said they invited somebody, I said, I hope it's Adenike. Didn't I? The producer.
And you make such a fantastic combination.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You find that most of our parents enable this and they excuse it and they wish it away. Yes. They say, "Who are you kidding me? He's your uncle. How can you say that?
Yes.
Come on, go and sleep."
Yes, there's been a lot of incest rape.
yes.
In our society. Nikke mentioned something earlier about, they'll tell you it's been going on for a long time. Well, being the oldest elephant in the room amongst all these old elephants, because you people are not young. Don't pretend you're youth. You're not youth. There's only one youth. Lobe, I can see him. There's only one youth over there. Really, I have friends who had to leave this country whilst they were in university, because I mean, my best friend in the world, she's not a friend, she's a sister, she's a blood to me, she's everything. My life wouldn't be anything it is without her. And I remember when I was writing my article, when Monica Osage came out, and she said to me, she said, don't you, didn't I ever tell you the story of Momsy? She was going to she was already in university, she was going to university, and then the teacher started on her, literally started to sexual, not just harass her, but he really took it to the nth point. So they then broke up for school. She went back home. She wouldn't go back. I mean, Timba noise. No, I'm not going back. What's going on? I'm not going back. Eventually, she told, and her mom is a feminist, which was a good thing. I mean, look, feminism is just great. But anyway, everybody should be a feminist. So she tells her mom, and her uncle happened to be there. And the mom is like, but you have to go to school. Okay, we have to go and find you another school. And the uncle said, no, this child was born in England. I beg, send her back. Yeah. Send her. Let her go back to England. And that's how my girlfriend, and Lord, I'm so glad that happened, because I would never have met her otherwise. That's how she ended up living in England for the rest of her life, and she's still there now. But so that question about no education, I'll start from the no. No, gosh, I'm about to discombobulate people again. So here's what it is. There is no negotiation on no. This is what you need to learn. If you start, they call it heavy petting in our days. They call it smooshing. They call it, what do they call it? Making out. Now we use the American slang. Foreplay. Yeah. If you start making out with a woman and she says, stop, you have to stop. I'm so sorry. It might be the single most painful experience of that moment. And you're thinking, damn, am I going to control this? Stop. You have to stop. If you are already in the process of lovemaking and she changes her mind and she says, stop. She says, I don't want this anymore. You have to stop. I'm telling you, you have to stop. Every party is allowed to change their mind at any time. And that's where no is so important. That's the thing about consent. Recently there was a campaign about what is consent, what is consent, what is consent. And I had this conversation with my son. I remember my sister taking him to school, and she recently, he was starting, as I said, he was 17, starting A-level school, and she sat him there because he was all excited. Oh, Auntie Bibi, I'm going to a new school, which is, there's like 4,000 students, at least some of the girls will fancy me, yada, yada, and she's like, sit down, sit. And this was in England, and she said, look here, if you start kissing a girl, and she says, no, you have to stop. If you get into the process, however difficult it is, and she says she doesn't want this anymore, stop. You say, because you do not want a Me Too moment in your life. We will kill you before they do, right? And that's what's important. And I think that's the message we need to get, is that no is a non-negotiable sentence, or word rather. No is not negotiable.
Because we have just 1 minute left on the show, very fun.
Oh wow, it's gone so quick.
Whose responsibility is it to say no? Who bears the brunt of that responsibility? I know the weight is,
because let's not divide it and say whose responsibility, because honestly it's two people doing things.
Yes.
Two are consenting people, and this is me hoping that neither one of them is underage. With the story we saw. Exactly. There is no underage story. And speaking of underage, the conversation also goes to youth coppers.
Yes.
Corps members who go to schools, who are assigned to schools and then end up dating their students. It's a huge no. The corps members come to your office to intern or do service here, you want to start to date them, it's a no. There's something called power. So the reality is, because there are two consenting adults in it, either one of them is at liberty to say no.
At any given time.
At any point in time. Yeah. So I don't want the conversation to feel like it's just a woman who has the man can actually say, stop it, I don't like it, I don't want to be a part of this. And it's also necessary for me to state here emphatically that, look, we're not saying do not compliment a woman. If you see a woman and say she's looking nice, or even a man, you say, you will know when you have passed that line.
That's right.
Do not pass the line. Do not sexualize people in an attempt to commend their dressing or how they smell. Oh, you smell like it's okay. If in doubt, just shut up.
And then if the person says they feel uncomfortable,
once people tell you that, please stop it, I feel like you should stop it. I'm excited at this conversation. It's taking a slow pace, let's be honest. But the reality is there's so much that will happen. And I'm waiting for when we will get into the corporates, when we will get into the banking sector.
Everywhere.
When we will get into entertainment and politics.
Sex and Nollywood.
And Nollywood, exactly. So the reality is, again, you cannot feign ignorance. The reality, is that you've always known it doesn't mean that it is right. Learn, unlearn, relearn. The conversation will continue. It also would extend to generations. Like Ms. Ireti has talked about, talking to your children about it. It's also having good relationship with your kids, because once you have good relationships with your kids, nobody, a Boniface will not say, I will tell your mother. You say, oh, my mom knows. Exactly. So,
thank you very much. I can't thank you enough, Ms. Ireti.
Quickly, yes. So we have a petition right now. You can get it on our handle, no more 234NG. The petition is, we launched it about 2 weeks ago, actually. And the petition is for the government to declare a state of emergency on the sexual violence crisis that we have in Nigeria. I'll come in another time and explain what that state of emergency means. But please, we're trying to get 100,000 signatures. I'll send it to you guys. Please put it on your website and your handles. But please sign it. It's literally to get this conversation going and to get government to take full ownership. Because at the end of the day, they are responsible for our safety.
Engage Ms. Ireti at CCOG Lagos and Adenike Oyetunde at Denike Oyetunde. Ayo and Valentine are signing off right now.
Signing off right now. Follow us at Valentine Ovo on all social media platforms.
At Ayamaro Essay on all social media platforms. Tomorrow we'll come back to talk about the International Day of the Girl Child, being 11th of October. Stay with us here on Smooth.
Thank you.
You guys did great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really wish I had